Welcome back. This is lesson 6, creating a custom shape. Some of the things that we're going to do in this lesson, we're going to talk again briefly about why the out-of-the-box shapes aren't enough, although the ones that come packaged with Visio are pretty darn great. Going to reintroduce you to something we've seen briefly called the shape sheet, and then we're going to go ahead and create a shape that has some data associated with it and show you how you can create that using the user interface and what you can do with this shape. And then from there, we're going to talk about how you can take these basic building blocks that you're learning and create very fancy shapes that have behavior, data, and can really let you quickly and easily convey information and do things that are beyond what you can just do out of the box. So first of all, I'm going to just create a new page by going down and clicking on the plus sign. Of course, the other thing you can do is you can right click down on the pages and say insert. So I'm going to click on the plus sign. We have a new page, and as you've seen many times, Visio comes with out-of-the-box shapes, and the basic shapes in the general category basic shapes, there's many ways I can show you this, but let's just use the basic shapes. You've got real simple shapes: rectangles, ellipses, triangles, and when you look at the shape, they all seem to possess some similar characteristics in that they have these little dots on the outside, and you can grab those and you can size them. You can, at the corner, pretty predictable things. You can use the arrow at the top, the circular arrow, and you can rotate the shape. And then from the home ribbon, you've got things where you can align shapes. You can position them relative to other shapes. You can group them together. We'll cover some of those things, but those are just easy, basic Visio things that, if you want to know more, we can certainly talk about that. Something that I don't know we have talked about much, but you'll notice on this triangle shape, there's this yellow dot. That's called a control handle. So if you get your cursor over it to where it turns into a four-headed arrow, you can move the control point, and you can see that by moving it, having a little difficulty getting onto it here, by moving it, you can significantly change the way the shape looks. So by starting with a basic triangle and this control point, you can achieve something pretty interesting. And then some of these other shapes have multiple control points, and this one lets you independently adjust things, and some of these have just one control point, but it acts symmetrically. So Visio gives you some basic shapes, some shapes with some additional behavior, and that may be enough to do what you want. Or in other cases, you may want to put some text on the shape, so you can just highlight the shape and then just literally start typing. But what we would like to do is we would like to take this kind of out-of-the-box behavior and associate with this shape data beyond just text on the shape, and maybe control what this shape can do, maybe by right-clicking on it, extend it with some behavior to where it can call an action, do something. And so that's what this session's really all about. And if we go back to, and I'm just going to use a technique I use, a support tool of Visio has this nav links button, and you can either do it on a per page basis or every page in the document. I'm just going to click on nav links because I want to quickly be able to get back to the lessons page, and from there, lesson 6. So behind all the shapes in Visio is something called a shape sheet. So at the risk of getting technical, we're going to go to the object model, which maybe is an object model, maybe just kind of a visual representation of things in Visio. And I just want to talk about this briefly. So Visio has an application object you can interact with. And then it's got some things that you're familiar with, but are actual objects with properties and methods on them. So there's a document object that's part of a documents collection. There's masters. There's pages. We've certainly seen pages in action down here at the bottom. And then pages contain shapes. So everything on that you see in front of you is a shape of some kind. And what we're trying to talk about now is, and I guess for completeness, there's also styles, but all these things, documents, pages, masters, shapes, styles, have this thing called a shape sheet behind them. And the shapes sheet is divided into sections, and there's a couple different kinds, but for now, just there's sections. And a section contains typically one or more rows, and a row contains one or more cells. So what does it sound like? Well, it sure sounds like a spreadsheet. And I don't know, is that where the name came from? Shape sheet, spreadsheet? Perhaps. I don't know that that's, a bad way of thinking about it. So the big question is, well, how do we get to the shape sheet? Well, of course, like most things, there's many ways you can do it. If you click on a shape, in fact, let me just go show you there's no magic here. I'm going to drag a rectangle on. And if you right click on the shape, it says show shape sheet. Now you may, I think this just always worked, but you remember that we talked about turning on developer mode in File, Options, Advanced, scroll all the way down. So be sure you have run in developer mode on. It talks about turning on certain user interface things. It most definitely enables the developer ribbon, and I think it may also control whether you see show shapes sheet when you right click on a shape. But you guys are power users, so run in developer mode. So one thing you can do is you can highlight a shape, click on a shape and right click and show shape sheet. I'm not choosing that. I just want to show you how you can get to it. Another thing you can do is you can go to the developer tab on the ribbon, and you can go to show shape sheet, and you can show the shape sheet, that's hard to say, for a shape, meaning the one you're on, selected shape, or the page you're on, or the document you have open. And I'm pretty sure that the only way to get to the page and document shape sheet is through this developer ribbon, although I think you could also use the document explorer, which shows you the document, some things inside the document, and I think from here, you can also click show shape sheet. So most of the time, it's not positively true, but most of the time you're going to want to open the shape sheet for a shape. But if you do need to get to the shape sheet for a document or master or some other things, just remember that the developer ribbon tab's your friend, and that's a convenient thing to remember, including the Draw and Explorer. So going back to the shape sheet, I'm going to right click once again. I'm going to highlight the shape and right click and click on show shape sheet. And then on my machine, it opens at the bottom. That's probably what's going to happen on yours. You can drag the window around. Visio does not let you move this outside of the application window, which I think is unfortunate, especially now that everybody has multiple monitors. So you may want to orient things, but where it shows up usually gives you an opportunity to see the shape and interact with the shape sheet window. If you open up a shape sheet for another shape, you can put them side by side. So anyway, I'm not going to go too much into that. But you can see we have different sections in this shape sheet: shape transform, user-defined cells, connection points. If you click on the title, the section collapses. If you click on it again, it expands. If you right click, and I think you can right click anywhere, you can show formulas that are in the cells, or you can show values. That's stuff you just makes sense from like Excel. But the thing I want to show you is view sections. So I'm going to click on view sections. And here are all the different sections that a sheet shape can have. So it can have one-dimensional endpoints, shape transforms, all these different sections. I'm going to cancel, and now I'm going to click on Insert Section. So this is where you can insert sections that are possibly added to a shape that don't currently exist. So that's really what we're going to cover in this lesson. I'm not going to go through all the different sections and all of the different uses of those. We'll just kind of cover those as needed. So I've closed the shape sheet window, and then I'm going to just expand this so we can get back to where we were. So I'm going to go back to, I don't know if we've talked about this, down in the lower right hand corner there's a, I can't really see that, but it's a box with some arrows that I think it means, well, it says fit page to current window. So that's a way of getting the page to zoom back to where you are. Now, helpfully, Support Tools Visio automatically will zoom the window to full screen whenever you change pages. So I'm going to hold down the control key and rotate the mouse. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to go to another page. And now watch what happens when I click on Object Model. We know when we left, it was zoomed in. So there, it's zoomed out. All that magic happens because of Support Tools Visio. If you don't use Support Tool Visio, then you just click on that button down there. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to navigate down here using the navigation shapes that I've created to the shape sheet. Once again, holding down the control key, which turns the cursor into a hand to navigate using the hyperlink. And what I tried to do here is kind of give you a feel for what sections are available for the different things we just talked about in the object model. There's the sections for the document. There's the sections for the page. Not quite sure what this is. I have to think about that again. I think that might be style. Could be wrong. Well, there it is, style properties. I may have just answered my question. And then this is what you can have for a shape. Now you'll notice some of these sections are common across all the different things. So if you look over here, shape data, that exists in the document. Shape data on the page doesn't look like it exists on a style. Shape data there on the shape. So some of these sections exist on more than one type of thing. These shapes down here at the bottom, you can click on them. So if I go to one we just talked about, shape data, this shows what the shape data row looks like in the shape sheet. And we'll be talking more about that. In fact, we'll be using this a lot in this lesson to talk about things. But once again, a shape sheet has these different sections, and each section, going back to the object model, consists of one or more rows, and a row contains one or more cells. And as a final thing, cell references is something that kind of tells you how you can refer to different things. Not really going to talk about this much in this lesson, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And once again, these navigation links on the outside of this document, CHR Notes Visio, are just quick ways of getting to things that are important things that I think are helpful as you dig into Visio. From concepts in the object model, we've already talked about files, the difference between a document and a stencil and a template. So those are just ways of quickly getting back to places you want to go to. So we're going to go back to lesson and lesson 6. And what we're going to do next is we're going to create a rectangle, and then we are going to quickly look at the shape sheet. We are going to add data to that rectangle, and we're going to look at the shape sheet again and see what changed. And if you look at this page, you can kind of see where we're going. And then we're going to add a field to that shape to let the data that's in the data field show up through the text box. And all along the way, we're going to be using the shape sheet, and we're going to be following the sections that are possibly there, which ones got added, what you can add through the user interface, what you can add through the shape sheet, and we're going to end up with a really simple thing. We're going to have a rectangle that has some data on it. Look over here, shape data. It's going to have a field called text, and the default value is set to text, and that text is going to show up. So that's what we're going to do next. But you might want to have this page available to you as you're watching the video, because we're going to create it just with a blank page, because I think that might be easier to follow. Okay, so I've opened up another instance of Visio, and I've gone to my masters shapes, and I've opened up basic shapes, and I'm just dragging out a rectangle. Now, if you don't want to do that, we also know that you can just go to the home screen and get a basic rectangle right from the user interface. So using whatever technique you want, drag yourself out a rectangle to work with. But they're both shapes. They're going to work the same way. So I'm just going to use the bottom one because it's kind of more consistent with kind of what I want to show as we aggregate these together into different things. So we're going to right click on the shape and go to Show Shape Sheet. And then down here on the bottom of the screen, the shape sheet opens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in Visio, maybe there's a way of doing this more efficiently, but I'm going to try to arrange, and close the data thing for right now, arrange these such that we can see Visio in the background. And if I can just wrestle this thing into the ground, there might be something on the view menu to do this more easily, but being somewhat stubborn. Okay, so a half an hour later, a few snacks, I've wrestled this to the ground. So we've got the drawing, and over in the drawing we have our rectangle. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit for our rectangle. And over here we have the shape sheet for that rectangle. And I'll talk more about this, but if you look up here, it's drawing one. That's the name of the file. We haven't saved it yet. We're on page one, so page one, and we're on the second shape on the sheet, which has a lovely name, sheet.2, which is the second shape on the sheet, and it's of type shape. So in the shape sheet window, we've got a shape transform section. I'm going to click on it, collapse it, a geometry section, a protection section. So I'm just going to go ahead and collapse all these. And we know that we really didn't do anything special. We just created a rectangle. And so going back to CHR notes, what is right here under rectangle is what we're seeing in the shape sheet. So I'm going to open up the shape transform section, and I'm going to go back to the user interface, and you got to remember to activate the user interface. So I'm going to click on the shape, and I'm going to click and hold on the lower right hand corner dot, and watch what happens up here in the width and height sections, shape transform section. So I'm going to drag, and you see how the values changed. Now I'm going to click on the middle here and watch the height. I'm going to drag down, see that the height got bigger. We'll talk more about the other cells here. So shape transform is the section. This section does not have individual rows. It's only got, it's called the object section. And so it contains cells directly. So there's a width cell, a height cell, etc. So you can use the user interface, of course, to change the values, or you can go here to the shape sheet. So I'm going to click on that cell, and then up here you get a, I don't know what it's called, but in Excel that would probably be called the formula bar. And you can of course cancel out of it by just clicking the X. But I'm going to highlight the whole thing, and I'm going to type 1, press return. And now we've set it to a height of 1 inches. Now, Visio tries to be smart about what you're trying to do. So you're actually entering a formula. So it says equal 1, and then it defaults the units to inches. So there's more to it, but all I want you to really kind of take away from this is that you can interact with the shape through the user interface, or you can interact with the shape through the shapesheet editor. So we're going to click here on angle, and we're going to type in 30, and sure enough, it rotated 30 degrees. Now, whether it rotated 30 degrees in the orientation you expected, I'll leave that for you to ponder. If I zoom out, it's actually a little bit more than I wanted to show you. If I zoom out, and I think, oh, look at that. I click down there on fit to window. So if I zoom out, just kind of look at pin X and pin Y, and so it's like almost 5 inches in both directions. So looks like pin X and pin Y is relative to the page. So I'm going to change this to 1, and you can see that, it may be hard to understand this, but the center of the shape, think of that pivot point in the middle, is 1 inch in from the edge. If I move it to 7 inches, you can see that it moved over. So that's a position relative to its parent, which is the page. If I pick pin Y and make it 3, you'll see that it moves down because it starts at the bottom. And then local pin X, pin Y is a formula that said it's the width times 0.5 and the height times 0.5. So if you click back on the shape, it's just saying that it's going to pivot around the center of the shape. So you can change the behavior, you can change the characteristics of the shape by using the user interface or the shape sheet. So we're really not going to go through all the different sections, but what I want to do now is I want to collapse shape transform, and I'm going to right click and view sections, and you will see here that there's a whole bunch of different section names, some of which are grayed out and some of which are checked and enabled. So this says that it has a shape transform section and it's visible. If we uncheck this and say OK, what you should see is that shape transform section is no longer visible. It certainly still exists, but sometimes you just want to see fewer things. I actually rarely, I don't know if I've ever done this, have turned off sections. So we're just going to go there and click back on shape transform. But the other thing is, if you right click, you can insert a section. So what I'm going to do is show you that if we click on shape data, we can create a new section called shape data. And this has multiple rows. You can right click here and click on insert row, which gives us another one. If you highlight the row, we can rename it to text, and you notice it says prop.text, and we can change this to color. And I'm just going to now go back to the shape, and I'm gonna, just so we can see this without moving things around, gonna collapse the shapes, and I'm going to go down here to data, shape data, which opens up this window, and we've seen this many times before. And you'll notice that shape data has those words text and color. There are text and color, and it's got a default value. Let's not worry about all that right now. The other way that we could have created that section, shape data, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag a new shape on, and I'm going to show shape sheet. And so if I drag this over and I collapse the sections and I go back to the drawing, right click, oops, sorry, this is the new shape, right click, and we're already seeing the shape data window, but what we want to do is we want to define shape data. So then what happens is this user interface opens, and it gives us the ability through a user interface to basically interact with the shape sheet and do what can be done in the shape sheet from a much friendlier user interface. So I'm going to call this weight, and there's the notion of the label on the user interface and the actual value of the field behind the scenes. So I'm going to call this WEIGHT1 just to show you the difference. So the label has a value and then the name of the field behind the scenes. You can pick a data type, pretty predictable stuff. You can format it, you can set a default value, you can control whether the another user interface opens when you drop a shape on the page. You can hide it. So we're going to go ahead, and this is really important because this always confuses me. If you try to change something up here, you're just going to overwrite things. So you have to click New, and then you get a new property. So we'll call this height, and I'll make this HEIGHT1 just so you can see the difference. And now watch what happens over here on the shape sheet when I click OK. So a shape data section got added, and there you can see the name of it is weight 1 and height 1. There's the label, and it doesn't really matter, but where's value? There's nothing set for the value. Oops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and just show this. I'm going to type 60. And you can see over here that in the user interface, the value 60 appeared. We've got this shape highlighted. And if I type 20 over here, height is 20. If we come back to the user interface and we change this to 90, look back over on the shape sheet, it's now set to 90. And notice that it treats it as a string, so it puts quotes around it. So that is what happens whether you go to the user interface and right-click and go to Define Shape Data, or if you go into the shape sheet directly and add that section. So in the way of review, shapes have sections, have a shape sheet. Shape sheets have sections which contain rows, which contain cells. There's a default set that come with a shape. You can insert additional ones. And so a lot of what we're going to be covering in the rest of this lesson and in the future is, when you might want to add sections and how they can help you do really cool things. When I showed you those rectangles that had the little yellow circle, that's a control section. Hyperlinks are somewhat obvious. It's where you store the information that allows you to click on a shape and hyperlink to somewhere. So there's all sorts of cool things you can do. We're going to cover one more in this lesson, which is not something you can insert directly in the user interface. So let's go explore that next. Okay, so now that you've seen shapes and shape sheets, let's kind of repeat what we just did. We're going to click on the rectangle tool. We're going to drag out a rectangle. We're going to right click. We're going to go Data, Define Shape Data. We're going to create a property called Text, and I typically call them by the same name. One note is names can't have spaces. I'm not sure what special characters you can use. So if it's text field, you would have to call the name text field. I think you might be able to use underscores in case it any way you want, but I'm just going to make it text and text. And I'm going to leave it as type string. And just so we have something to see, we're going to set the default value to text in brackets, click OK. And what you'll notice is over here in the shape data window, sure enough, there's a field called text, and it's got the value angle brackets text in it, but it does not show up in the shape. So what's going on there? Well, what we've done is we've associated data with the shape, but we haven't said anything about how that's data used. It exists. So you can have data in a shape And sometimes you just want to associate it, but sometimes you want it to actually present or control things. And so let's go see how we can make that text show up in the shape. So what we're going to do is open up our shape sheet window and do the same somewhat painful exercise of moving the window over here. So we know we've got this shape data section, and the field is called, or the row is called prop.text. For reasons I don't fully understand, this is called shape data, but the name of the field is prop, and then the name you give it. So in this case, we called the field text. So what I'm going to do is go back to the drawing here. I've already got the shape highlighted, and I'm going to go to insert. Now there may be other ways of doing this. You could certainly do it in code, but I don't think there's any other way of doing it through the user interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert a field. And what we're basically doing, and notice that we're in the text section of the insert ribbon. We're going to insert a field using shape data. Now before I click on that, you can insert, time, information about the document, the page, all sorts of different things. Another section of the shape sheet called user defined cells, but we're going to click on shape data. And when I click on it, it's going to show me all the fields that are available in shape data. And right now we only have prop text. So I'm going to cancel here for a minute. I'm going to right click on the shape, define shape data. And remember, don't just try changing this. Click new, so we get a new field, text, and we're going to call it this color. And just to have fun, I'm going to make it a fixed list and make it red, green, and blue. And I think that's the way you do it, is with commas. Click OK. And so now in color, we have a drop down red, green, and blue. And you can see over here in the shape sheet, we have a new row called color. The label is color. The values are held in format. If we move over I passed it. Sorry, my bad. The type is 1. 0 is, I think, string. 1 is, I guess, list. So you can figure all that out. That's something you can look up. I think the CHR notes may cover that. But the thing I wanted to show you is we now have 2 fields of shape data. So if we go back to the drawing and we click on insert, text, field, when we click on shape data now, it lets us pick one of those fields, text or color. So first I'm going to click on text, click OK. And sure enough, you can see now that the data that's in the text row, the string in angle brackets text, shows up in the shape. If we go back here to field and flip it to color, you can see that it's set to 0, and that's because we didn't pick one. So now if we pick, oops, obviously it's not a comma, maybe it's a semicolon. Anyway, I'll go, let's go figure that out right now. This is stuff that sometimes I just forget, and once you do it enough, you just remember. So let's try semicolons. Red, green, blue, and we'll take away, click OK. Okay, there we go. So it's semicolons. So now you can pick red, green, or blue, and that lets you pick from a constrained value list and then have that field show up in the shape itself. So that's kind of the basics of shapes and shape sheets, and using the user interface to interact with the shape sheet, using the shape sheet directly. And you can kind of imagine what you can do now is you've got all these different pieces of information in the shape that you can control through the user interface or through the shape sheet. You can have things interact with each other. So imagine if the word is red, you change the color of the text to red. That's all stuff that you would do with formulas in the shape sheet. I think that's what we're going to cover for this lesson. What we'll do next time is see how using these basic techniques we can build very complicated shapes. So just to give you an example of that, and I know you've seen these before, but I think it just kind of reinforces this. So we're going to go back to napkin making, super shapes. And no, I didn't create these in an afternoon. These have been created over a super long time. Some of them use, much more recent understanding and techniques. Some, go way back in time. But I worked at a company where it was very handy. It was very important to be able to clearly state what was going on with literally hundreds of different database tables. So Visio may even give you an out-of-the-box shape for a table, but hopefully this looks, and remember, Control 1 is how you get the cursor back. This looks, like a table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. And you can see that this shape, and the fact that it's a group with subshapes, don't worry about that right now. Just view what you've selected as a shape. It may be comprised of other shapes, but when you group things, there's still a shape for you to interact with. So this top level shape has all these different data elements associated with it. And some of them are strings, some of them are Boolean. So if we right click and go down to define shape data, you can see, and it doesn't look like you can expand this, so you can see that table name is a string, row action, oh my gosh, where's my mouse? Row action 2 is a fixed list, and it looks like it's got some things you can choose from, which, separated by semicolons, go figure. These things, don't worry about what they are yet, but notice here that the label is different from the name, and I'll explain that in just a minute. And it's of type Boolean. And if we go down to text size is a number, so you can see different types of data. So this shape, this table, is got a lot of data behind it. And so here's, let me kind of explain why I created it by showing you what it can do. So imagine you're just trying to document some action on a table. In this case, it's called Table 1. And let's turn this into a new name. We'll call it Project, so the project table. And this really isn't that interesting, but you can change the color of the header row. Maybe you want to, visually indicate a bunch of tables that are all somehow associated with each other. So maybe you do that with colors. But row actions 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can see there's 4 rows of this table. So the way I used it is, let's say the code in interacting with the project table always did a delete, and then it did a create. Distinguish that. What I did is I right-clicked on the shape, I duplicated it, so that was just a quick way of getting it back here. So instead, let's make it blank, and let's make this create. This might be a way to visually indicate to somebody in interacting, maybe this is part of a process. This project table, there's always a delete and then a create. In fact, let me maybe change this. This is always an update. So that would be a way of maybe visually indicating to people, hey, when changes are made to the project table, we do updates, where here it's kind of trying to show you that you do a delete and a create with, clearly implications. So that's one thing. I wanted to be able to visually indicate maybe how the table is used in a certain context. Another thing is, imagine you had 50 customers and not everybody had the project table. So there are little shapes hanging off of this. And if you turn on that field by setting it to true, this little, what does it look like? An Easter egg? That little Easter egg in the upper hand corner lights up. And then if we go down here to this one, true, and let's set this to project 2, and we will, without really explaining what this is, this might be a way of conveying to somebody that needs to understand that whoever orange is and whoever orange and blue are, they use the project table, but whoever green is use the project 2 table. And so the actual values of these strings were the names of different customers, because it turned out that not every customer used the same tables, and it was really hard for me to convey that to the development team without just talking for hours and hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video real quick and just kind of show you what that looked like when it was fully populated. But the point I'm trying to make here is this came out of a need for me to convey information visually, and by learning how to create these custom shapes yourself, associate data with them, and have the data drive the behavior of the shape, you can do some pretty interesting things, or at least I think so. Okay, I finally remembered where I put these. So I'm opening up a Visio file called CHR Notes Ease Architecture Tables. And this is the insanity. So this system had all these tables you see, and this is just table names A through O. Here's table names P through Z. And you can see if we zoom into these, this was, in fact, let me move over here and give you a better example. So this was an example of this PCN engines list table was only used by, looks like General Dynamics, GD. And so the reason I made the field name different than the label is, in case you wanted to reuse this, all you have to do is change the label, but the behavior doesn't change. And then some other things you can do here, and this is, for the future, you could use these other shapes which have, as you can see, data in them, and you can right click on it and you can toggle layer visibility, and nothing happened. But if I turn off tables, still nothing happened. Well, I'm going to have to go figure out what's going on here. But what you could do, I'm actually surprised this doesn't work, is you could control whether things appeared on the page by using these control labels. So I'll go figure out how to make that work again. But what it could do is you could say, show me all the tables that are used by GD, and depending on how you set these values, you would only see the tables used by that customer. So the need I had was to be able to show all these different tables, and unfortunately they were not all used by every customer, and it gave us the ability to have conversations around, well, could we get rid of the table? Should we do something different? And then the boxes around some of the tables indicated what part of the application used those. So let me see if I can try this. I'm going to right click on this, toggle layer visibility, and oh my gosh, none of those things are working. Oh, I see what happened here. For reasons I don't quite understand, but you'll see support tools Visio is not turned on here. So much of this depends on support tools Visio working in the background. So I will re-record this section with support tools Visio turned on. Not quite sure what happened there. And you'll see this behavior that I've verbally described actually come to life. So let me go figure that out, and I'll just show you real quickly, and we'll wrap this up. Okay. So I've reopened the file, and you can see up here support tools Visio shows up. So many of these things require that code ion, because the behavior of the shapes depends on being able to call code. So without explaining all the details, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this shape, and you can do a few things with it. You can, it has a name associated with it, so it's associated with the tables layer, and I think we talked a little bit about layers. So just in your mind, think about, I'm doing something with layers here. And then you can control whether it's visible, whether it's locked, or whether it prints. And I think we talked separately when we talked about layers, that layers have properties, and you can separately control whether they're visible, they print, they're active, and some other things. And so what I'm going to do here, and just so you know, there is a layer, so you can see there's a whole bunch of layers here. There's a layer called tables, and that shape I'm on right now, visible is set to true, and I won't explain more. I'll just kind of show you the magic. So I'm going to click on that shape. I'm going to right click, and these are all behavior extensions that were made to the shape using the shape sheet, and the shape sheet calls code. I'll show you that briefly in just a minute. So I'm going to toggle layer visibility and watch what happens to the diagram. Whoa, all the tables got turned off. Well, not all of them. The ones that are apparently obsolete got left on, and I'm sure there's something else here, and I just don't remember where it is. I haven't used this for a super long time. That's got obsolete tables re-enabled or left on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this AML shape, and with a little bit of luck, yes, the tables that belong to, amongst others, the AML layer display. So I just happen to know that by convention, I put the upper left-hand orange Easter egg that was associated with AML. So if we click on this shape, AML stands for Aston Martin. So those of you that are ready to buy yourself a fancy sports car, yeah, I got to work with them. So Aston Martin is enabled here. So watch what happens when I turn this to false. That Easter egg goes away. True. And the reason that shape appeared is because it's on the AML layer. Now, I don't check the event to see that, you change the value of that. That's why it didn't disappear. But if I, hopefully this is true, if I turn this to false and then I toggle the layer visibility and then toggle it back on, oh, it still shows up. I'm not sure why that's true. It must be. So we're going to click on the shape, and we're going to go to layers, and we're going to go to layer properties, and it looks like it's visible because it's I'm assuming it's because it's on the added update 7 layer and the AML layer and the navigation layer and the obsolete layer and the tables AML. So unfortunately, it's part of a lot of other things, and it just may be the case that it's being shown for a whole variety of reasons. But I think you get the idea that using data on shapes and putting some behavior here, you can do different interesting things to convey information. So whether you think that's a good way of doing things or not, a totally separate conversation. But when I would hire developers, instead of shocking them with, I would start with shocking them. Here's all the different tables. Hey, good news. Not every customer uses these. So when you look at a database from a customer, don't be surprised if you don't see them, because that was a very difficult thing to convey. And I thought this might be a good visual way of doing that. So that's a somewhat deeper dive that I totally forgot about, of showing you why shapes with data and behavior can be handy to convey information. That's it. Hope you got something out of this. Probably time for a break.